Hi, my name is Major Kinsley Jordan, call sign Trigger from Vance Air Force Base. And first I want to thank Mr. Kilborn and his team for setting up this EFB conference so we can all get educated on the rollout of the EFB and how we get to use it at our bases to help train the next wave of pilot training students across the command. One of the things that we've had the opportunity to do in the last several months at Vance is work with Pilot Training Next in looking into and developing what applications can be used on the EFB to better help the training and streamline the training once the EFB is actually in the hands of the students. There's three different ways that we've looked at this, three different applications and training areas that we've focused on. The first is courseware, the second is simulation, and the third is flight line or in-flight use. So first we'll focus on courseware. At the end of last month in April, we had the chance to come together at the 19th Air Force Academic Courseware Conference to talk about the T6 academics and how, frankly, they're outdated and antiquated. Now, it's not because the developers don't care. In fact, that's to the contrary. They've worked very hard to be able to do everything they can. It's just with the number of developers they have and the amount of courseware there is, there's just not enough room and time for them to be able to take a deep look at everything. So, as pilot training bases to include IFT, NJEPT, and the 558th RIQ Squadron here at Randolph, we looked at the objectives and the training objectives that they had within the courseware and saw if there is a way we could use commercial off-the-shelf courseware that would be available on the EFB to get it in the hands of the students earlier. The exciting part is right now we're testing 5 different off-the-shelf courseware that are aviation focused that would help teach the basic flight principles that the current courseware does, but in a far more interactive and accessible platform. Some of the ones we'll be talking about and showing you on here is King's Aviation is one of them. There's the Bold Method. There's also Sporty's Aviation Training School, OAPA, and the FAA.gov that has a lot of courseware and information on there that we can utilize to train the students. The focus area is if we can get this courseware training on the EFB or universally accessible so a student can see it and access this training for their Phase 1 academics on their phone or on the EFB or on any device that they have, then we've taken the restrictions from having it have to be in the CAI lab and now put education into the hands of the students so they can access it all day no matter where they are. The next piece on the courseware we talked about is training tools that exist. So the opportunity and the time to teach students how to do navigation, how to do in-flight planning, fuel planning, how to capture an ILS, a localizer, course intercepts, those are all great when you're having to write it on a paper, but those are long gone when you compare it to the tools that exist on the App Store, because right now there's several applications that exist like Flight Bundle, where a student has the opportunity to pull up VORs, TACANs, NDBs even, and learn how navigation works in reference to their aircraft while they use it in simulation. They can change what they're doing and where they're going on the application, and they can not only practice the navigation piece of it and approaches, but also practice the holding and the full parameters of what full procedures look like, all from the simple screen of the EFB instead of having to go back to the CAI lab. Again, this idea of having training that's on demand and on command that was sent forth by General Quast is the focus of the testing that we've been doing here. Another major piece that we've been working on at Vance Air Force Base is 360 videos and how we can use 360 videos to be an interactive question medium in the sense that if you have a 360 video, and we've all seen them where you can look around while the plane is in flight, or you can move it around on your finger with your finger to look in a different direction in the cockpit. Well, what if we have the capability to pause that video and then ask questions about reference points outside, whether it's a VFR entry or whether it's a specific road or departure, or where they should be looking and clearing when they're on climb out. That technology exists, and it's one of the ones that we've been looking into, again, advanced working with Pilot Training Next, of how to create 360 videos that are basically choose your own adventure, which tells the student whether or not they're progressing correctly or if they're making wrong assumptions or they don't fully understand the complete dynamic of the training that we're asking them to do. So again, courseware is a very exciting thing that we're looking at being able to apply on the EFB as soon as it's into the hands of the IPs and the students. Simulation was the next area we were looking at applying innovation through the EFB. Now, Pilot Training Next has done a phenomenal job of integrating virtual reality and simulation in the T6 specifically. One of the things that we thought about was, what if you were able to interlink the EFBs together in a virtual flying world and simulation and do things like pattern walks or even formation flying with an instructor pilot watching over and giving voice command and corrections over that virtual network? Well, that's actually capable. You can do that. Through programs like Infinite Flight and X-Plane 10 simulation, you can get into a virtual world at your pilot training base, whether it's Vance or Laughlin, NJIP, anywhere else, and you can log in with an instructor being a controller in the tower where they're actually talking to everybody else who's in that network, and the students through their EFB can log into the same simulated world and fly the pattern together. So instead of standing there with a metronome and having the students make radio calls on a piece of tape around the classroom, in the flight room, actually what you can do is now do the same thing, but in simulation in a real world, flying your T6 in the actual virtual realm of the pilot training base, with a student or with the instructor giving the call outs of the radio call from the RSU. The capability of simulation is absolutely unbelievable how you can work them together, and something that we've been working on and talking with Infinite Flight and X-Plane 10 to use specifically for our bases. The next thing we looked at is, what if you could have a student chair fly even on their EFB and then see what the results are? So that's even a possibility as well. We'll take, for example, an instrument story where a student is doing an out and back. At Vance, we go do out and back or round robins to Wichita often. So the reality of what we could do is we tell a student, I want you to mission plan in ForeFlight, your flight plan up to Wichita, what you're going to do, and how that sortie is going to go. The student could go from ForeFlight and the flight plan that he created in that. He could then send it to X-Plane 10 simulation or Infinite Flight through the KML file and the flight plan that they created. They export it over to the simulator. Then they can actually fly that in the simulator, and the simulator will record everything they've done. Now when they've done their sortie in the simulator, they can send that over to Cloud Ahoy and send you a debrief of the flight that they practiced without you ever having talked to them, or even before they show up to the sortie. The thing that does, it gives them the ability to train multitasking, profile management, in-flight checklist discipline, situational awareness, and even mission timeline of what that looks like and how often they need to be doing their checklist and updating what they're doing in flight. The capability of using the EFB in simulation from the time the student shows up in training to the time they leave is absolutely there, and we're so excited to get the operating processes down to be able to share them with you at your pilot training base. The last area we were looking into was pre-flight and in-flight adaptation and training to be able to use the EFB while we're on the go. So Randolph and the Pathfinder program found many ways forward using ForeFlight to be able to use in-flight for mission planning, to include weather, to include approach plates, to include flight planning on the go or actually before you even launched. And Pilot Training Next has been utilizing Cloud Ahoy. We've also been testing this as well with our students to find out what sorties does Cloud Ahoy, which is the debriefing tool, a three-dimensional debriefing tool that records everything you do in the flight and allows you to not only play it back, but also gives aircraft parameters, altitude, airspeed, ground speed, and three-dimensional maneuvering view of what you were actually doing during the flight. The amazing part is with the EFB coupled with a Stratus 2 puck that allows you to have an AHRS coupled with the EFB, it gives you a fidelity that can actually tell you if your student was swerving from center line or if they were S-ing down final. It's been absolutely unbelievable. ForeFlight gives us capability to receive weather in flight in the T6 as we don't have a weather radar. It gives us the ability to change whatever approach is instantaneously without having to flip through an approach plate, but it also gives us full situational awareness of the ADS-B to see where other aircraft are in conjunction with what our task is able to do. And the situational awareness in the building has been absolutely huge in being able to utilize that. But the next step and the real question is, how does that help the student to better go back and mission plan? Well, one of the sorties that I'm able to show you was with a student that was an early contact ride. Some of the things I was able to show them was not only where their flight path was on their patterns and what the winds were doing to them, pushing them one direction or the other, but also they were actually able to see the fidelity of their over rudder control and use across center line and back and forth on the runway because it actually showed that fidelity, which is unbelievable. The other thing that we can do with Cloud Ahoy is that we can actually send the flight once it's done to the student so they can chair fly and look over and see what mistakes they've made. Cloud Ahoy, this debriefing tool, is phenomenal because you can actually mark in the flight, whether it's an area they made a deviation or a mistake, you can hit the mark button, or when you know what you're already going to be doing on the sortie itself, you can plan out the maneuvers and then record each maneuver so the student and yourself know exactly where to go to see how they performed that maneuver. Right now, we're working not only with Cloud Ahoy, but also with Stratus and ForeFlight, because some of the deficiencies we've seen is once in the T6, once you get past about 95 degrees of bank, sometimes the GPS will drop out and you lose momentary tracking of the aircraft until you get back to 90 degrees. So the current use has been phenomenal in early contact sorties and early instrument and navigation sorties to include navigation, or cross countries as well. The next step of utilizing this training is now that you have the Cloud Ahoy debriefing capability, you can send it to the students so they can actually look and debrief what they did wrong, share it with the other students for lessons learned, and Cloud Ahoy is also working on the ability to overlay multiple flights together. So if you have a formation, you can take the Cloud Ahoy tracking from one aircraft and the other aircraft and overlay them together to see spatially where you are in relation to the other aircraft to see if you were doing a good job in staying in position, which is just phenomenal. The other piece is they can actually take the Cloud Ahoy flight they had and export it into a simulator and refly the sortie they just had in comparison to the one they flew actually in the aircraft. They can now do it in the simulation, kind of like we talked about before as the other category. So there's so many amazing opportunities and innovation steps that we're taking with the EFB that we've had the opportunity to test at Vance, and we're really excited about rolling out an operating way of how do we best use this, how do we train our instructors to use it, and how do we apply it across all of our pilot training bases in the most effective and efficient manner, and getting it into the hands of our IPs and our students so we can have a faster, more efficient training process as we go forward, as innovation continues to be brought into our pilot training bases. So if you have any questions at all, again, my name is Major Kinsley Jordan, call sign Trigger from Vance Air Force Base. My contact information is below. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email, or you can reach out to Killer, Mr. Kilborn, as he has my contact information as well. And Captain Osterloh Banger is also here to be able to answer any questions that we've been working on here at Vance. So thank you so much. We hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll be talking to you soon. Thank you.